What's up everyone, this is Brady from the Airsoft headquarters. Today I'm going to be bringing you an overview of the AK platform. This is going to be just a little bit of my experiences and my knowledge on these guns. So the AK platform is a very iconic and well-known gun, especially the one seen here, probably the most common platform. But the AK itself is very wide in its diversity. That includes different versions from Russia, as well as many other platforms derived from other countries. So this is going to be an overview on the AK platform, a little bit more for the novice and new to the platform, and not so much for those who are a little bit more experienced with the platform. So we're going to go over an overview of the gun itself, starting from tip, working to the butt. So starting with the muzzle device, I've got quite a few different examples here, starting with what you see on this model here. This would be the classic AK muzzle nut. It is extremely basic. It is literally just a threaded cap that goes over the muzzle. It doesn't do anything as far as flash hider. It's not a compensator. It is not a muzzle brake. Then we have something more as seen here with the classic AK, or the RPK rather, muzzle cone, which was a simple flash hider. Very, very simple, like the muzzle nut here, just with a cone on the end. Next, we have the DTK1, which is the classic flash hider on the 74 platform. This one here is both a flash hider and a muzzle brake, which is meant to compensate recoil. Basically, it helps pull the muzzle back forward as the gun recoils backwards. We have here the expansion chamber found on the Airsoft Beta Spetsnaz, which is not a real platform, however, is basically a slight modification that you would see on the carbine series, like the 100 series. Basically what it is an expansion chamber for the gas moving into a cone on the front to work as a flash hider. You then have the Krinkov blast deflector. This is kind of like the cone working as a flash hider, but also is meant to project gases forward and away from the user. Next, we have a much more modern device here. This is a Zenitco DTK flash hider here. This guy is very much multi-purpose. It is a flash hider, a compensator with ports coming out the top to push the muzzle back down and counteract muzzle rise, as well as these holes through the side, which are meant to be a muzzle brake and help fight that recoil. You'll also notice the tips are very pointed. This thing is also intended to be a glass breaker. And then moving into suppressors, I have a this would be the 9mm version of the PBS1 suppressor, which is just the shorter version of the longer PBS1, which is the 7.62 variant. And then you'll see behind me, right above my head, a DTK4, which is a 5.45 caliber suppressor. All right, moving back, we have the gas block. So on the classic AK here, this guy is very simple. You have the holder for your cleaning rod underneath here, and then just a very simple post with a semicircle guard around a singular vertical post. Directly behind that, and I'll spin the gun around so you can see a little bit better, is the gas tube. Now the gas tube on here, you'll notice, has this angled cut here with a front sling point. Now you will notice on some of the other platforms here, as they became more and more modern and varied a bit, these two pieces did change. Your front sight post became a little bit narrower front to back, and it also has a lug on the bottom for a bayonet. And then moving back to the gas block, there's a little bit different shape. It's a little bit more of a curve and then a vertical shape on it. So they do vary as you move through the models. So barrel, you have a few different lengths. So on the main AK platform, this is roughly a 15 or 16 inch barrel, which you do get the same length on the AKM, which is not really varying too much in the front end to the classic AK. But in comparison, the 74 does vary roughly between an inch to a half inch notice here, it is slightly longer. Now, the other sizes of AK are going to be anything from your carbine length, which is going to be ending at the gas block, which is also your front sight. So you notice on these guys, this is all one piece. It is both the front sight post and a gas block going into the gas tube. And then down into your short rifles, like a PP1901 Vityaz. These are much, much shorter barrels. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you do have the long barrels like the RPK. This is pushing out significantly longer. So then moving back from the gas block, we have the gas tube up on top and the handguard down below. Now, there's a lot of variations in this, so we're going to start with the traditional. Basic wooden handguard, a few vent holes in here. You will see basically almost the same thing with the AKM. The AKM has nearly the same thing with the simple change of a little bit wider protrusion on the lower handguard right here. Makes it a little bit easier to grip on. With more modern AKs, you do start to see polymer handguards on here as opposed to the wood. Now, this definitely does make them a bit lighter, as well as a little bit more resilient to wear and tear, which definitely on the battlefield, you're gonna have that. Also, they don't burn. That's the thing with AKs. You get them hot enough, those handguards can start on fire. That's an issue. Now, outside of your standard handguards, you do start to see some variations, like these guys here, which are a polymer railed handguard set. You have rails on the upper, rails on the sides of the lower, and then a rail underneath. Getting even more modern, you have some of these fully railed handguards like this replica Zenitco B30 and 31 set, where this is all CNC'd metal here, where it's all one long piece, skeletonized a little bit to save weight, and then same with the top piece. Now this guy in particular, you'll notice it goes past where the handguard normally ends here at the cap and extrudes forward over the gas tube to the front sight post. Now with your wooden handguard models, like the classic AK here, you don't have many options for putting accessories on there. Now you can swap these handguards out for something railed, like you see here on this 100 series carbine. Those they make options for that would just drop right in without issue. Now if you want to do something like the Zenitco style or the Magpul or some of those other ones, you may not necessarily be able to fit that. It is going to be model specific. Moving back from the handguards, we have the rear sight post. This is basically a block clamped onto the barrel that houses your rear sight. Now the rear sights on these are a little bit different from what you would normally see. They're adjustable and they have a little bit unique of an adjustment. They basically have a drum on here with a button. You're gonna press that and slide it to the desired range that you want to set it at, and you'll see it raises up as you move it forward to increase range, and drops down as you slide it backwards to decrease range. So again, the movement here will raise and lower it. Now, a common mistake I see people do is do this. The sight does not flip up. That is not how it is meant to go. So moving back from there, you have the charging handle here. It is a very simple tang off the side, reciprocates backwards. Now on this guy, it doesn't move very far. That's just because of this particular model. And directly behind that, you have the selector. Similar to other things on the AK, it is very different from other guns. It is this paddle that hinges downwards into positions. And unlike other guns, it starts at safe on top. The very next position is your full auto. And then moving all the way down, we go into safe. Now, the idea behind this is in one quick motion, you can very quickly go into semi without going into full auto accidentally to save ammo. Below that, we have the magwell, the magazine release, and the trigger and trigger guard. So the magazine goes in a rocking motion. So basically you take the front of the magazine in, hook it in the front, and rock it backwards to lock it in. Directly behind that is the mag release, which is a simple paddle To release, you press forward on it, rock the mag forward. Directly behind that and attached to the magazine release is your trigger guard and your trigger. Above all of this, you have the dust cover, which is basically a cover for the receiver, housing everything underneath with a simple button on the back here that you press in to release the mechanism. Now, this is where a lot of people will struggle, is putting this dust cover back on. This is really something that just comes from experience and knowing what to do and what not to do, but basically hook the front of the dust cover in at the front and push straight down until the button catches. With the dust covers, you also will have a couple different variations. Like, for example, on the PP19, this has a hinged dust cover, which press the button in and it stays attached and simply hinges upwards. Now, another example of a different style would be this 74, which has a rail bolted, basically attaches up here at the front where your rear sight would be, and then comes down and bolts through the stock tang. This gives you a rail above the dust cover. Now, the Vityaz does have the rail built in. Hard to see because of the optic on there, but that rail is built right onto the dust cover. So now something else that some of these AKs are going to have is this guy right here. This is an optic rail. It is basically a dovetail mount that a rail or a sight will slide onto, usually from rear to front, and clamp onto to give you the option of an optic. Now, this does vary a little bit between models, primarily between your older style and newer style, not enough to really make any difference as far as what will fit it. You will also notice some differences in receivers, like with this 74M. This is a folding stock. You will see right here above my finger is a latch. This is what catches the stock when you fold it. Like so, and then releases via the button on the back of the stock and locks back in position. Now, there are some differences between versions of the AK when it comes to receiver. Most notable is going to be the cut of the receiver, which you'll notice on the magwell. This is what's known as a milled receiver. You have this large rectangular cutout on here, versus pretty much everything going forward from the classic AK is what's known as a stamped receiver, and it will have a stamped, basically oval shape right above the magwell there. Directly below this, we have the pistol grip. Very, very simple design, especially on this model. It is just a round chunk of wood on there. And then behind that, you have the stock. Now, grips and stocks do vary a lot between models. The classic AK is definitely the most basic of stocks. It is very, very simple in attachment. It has a tang on the top and a tang on the bottom. It slides onto there and is bolted through. So different variants on those stocks and grips. For the grip here, a lot more modern ones are going to use a polymer-based grip. This one in particular is going to be of a little bit of a purple plum style. And then you'll notice the shape on the 74 and the AKM stocks are going to be a little slimmer, especially side profile wise. They're not quite as chunky, and they use a single tang on the top versus the dual tang, where you have no tang on the bottom. You will also see some variations like this one here using a buffer tube. It attaches very similarly to the full stock with a single tang on top, but it is just a little different. This buffer tube does allow for the attachment of M4 style stocks. And then you have some more modern variations on the folding stock with this Zenitco style stock here, which features a adjustable cheek riser, adjustable length of pull, and again, does fold to the left side of the gun. Now, with these folding stocks in the Russian style, like I said, folding to the left side, it does mean that if you are utilizing the side rail here for an optic, it does go over top like so, rendering that useless. Now, in addition to the folding stocks, you do have something a little bit different with these Romanians. Their folding stock folds off to the right side of the weapon, which would leave your optic mount free to be in use with or without the stock folded. Now, it does sit slightly in front of your selector here, but it is not necessarily in the way. You can still actuate it with the stock there. So sling mounts on these guns are going to be a little bit weird. Now on the classic AK, you do have this, you could call it a loop that does actuate on the side here, and your front hook right here at the gas block. Now, as you move forward with the newer style ones, your sling points are going to be on two sides, as you will see with the classic 74M, the current service rifle. You have your rear sling point on the right side of the weapon and your front sling point up on the left. Now, you do find some aftermarket options, like for example, this is a Midwest Industries quick detach sling mount that replaces the loop on the 74 full stock. And then I have a Magpul M-LOK paraclip, which is going to mount on M-LOK, which this does allow this gun to have both of them on the left side of the weapon and use a little bit more modern sling styles. So now, a little bit of the history on the AK platform. Now, the classic AK, which you see in my hands here, started design in 1946 to about 1948. So it's pretty old. We're talking just past World War II. This model was out for a number of years, pushing out into about the 50s when you had the next version, or the AKM. Basically, AK standing for Automat Kalashnikov, and then the AKM basically is the M standing for modernized, is the modernized version of that first model. Again, with the stamped style receiver with that stamp mark on there versus the milled style receiver. Not too much externally is different on these. Slight things like the stock and the handguard are modeled a little bit different. Otherwise, your gas block is the same style. Your front sight is the same style. Now you do have the slant brake on there, which was a recoil compensation, or muzzle rise rather, compensation versus the flat muzzle nut, but they're pretty similar. Then you had the 74 series after the AKM, which had the similar stamp style receiver and a very similar style stock with small changes, but they did change in caliber. So your original AK was a 7.62 by 39, and then with the 74 they did transition into the 5.45 caliber. As we talked before, you do have the little bit different front sight post and then the different shaped gas block with this more vertical curvature here. Just like with the AKM from the AK, you have the AK-74M from the 74, which is the modernized version, and has that folding stock on here. Everything else is mostly the same. They did go to the polymer style versus the wood style handguards, but not too much changed. Now, variations on the same model are going to be seen from one country to the next. So here we have the Russian AKM. I have with me two variations on the same model coming from two different countries. I have a Romanian Ames and a Hungarian AMD. So you will notice they're very much different looking, but they're all based on the same model. So with the Hungarian here, you have a very uniquely shaped handguard here, or the pistol grip on here, and then the same style pistol grip mounted in reverse on the front. It is mounted to this, basically what is a heat shield for a lower handguard. The gas tube is completely free float. There is no handguard up there. It is, you could say, featureless, smooth. But otherwise the stock is the same. The receiver, dust cover, everything there is the same. And then the Romanian Ames features their side folding stock, which again goes to the right side of the weapon like so, versus the left like the Russians. And then it has this vertical foregrip built into the lower handguard. Again, otherwise this is basically the same as your Russian. Now you also have your American ones, like for example there are the Rifle Dynamics manufactured ones, which will be, again, based on the same platform, which will feature very different externals. You've got usually buffer tubes, a lot of times different grips. They have their own unique gas block, which is similar to the carbine series, where it is the front sight and gas block post in one. So you're going to see a lot of different variations between countries, all based on the same model. Yeah, and this difference from country to country and this wide variation is one of the reasons I like AKs so much, because you do get a lot of diversity. Yeah, they are all basically AKMs, but like just going from one country to the next, you can have a lot of differences. So they are still very unique guns. So I have here a selection of a bunch of different AK mags. I have a section here of 7.62, some 5.45, a 5.56, and a 9mm mag. Now, unlike in real steel, these can go in, besides 9mm, in pretty much any model. I can take classic AK, which is a 7.62 rifle, and put a 5.45 magazine in it. It'll work, there's no problems. Now, this obviously would not work in real life, but that is the great thing about Airsoft, is it doesn't matter. So a great example of this would be the 100 series carbine, which in real life they make versions in 7.62, 5.45, and 5.56. So an exact example of this would be a 102. A 105. And now a 104. Alright guys, this has been my overview video on the AK family. If you have any questions or follow-ups, please leave them in the comments below. Remember, have a good one, and stay safe, stay positive. Catch you next time.